Hey everybody, this is the Drive On Podcast, where we talk about issues affecting veterans after they get out of the military. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Drive On Podcast. Today, my guest is Seth Schultz, who is a PHP programmer and developer. He's also one of the founders of a company called Event Espresso. Seth has been in web design and development since the early 2000s, but his journey to running a successful software business wasn't always an easy road. Seth talked about his journey in a speech a few years ago at a conference in Las Vegas that I had the opportunity to attend. Seth had served in the Arizona Air National Guard in the mid-90s and had hopes of working in the aerospace industry after getting out of the National Guard. So Seth, welcome to the show, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me. I graduated high school in the mid '90s and went directly right from high school into the Air National Guard, where I wanted to learn basically wanted to learn non-destructive inspection and stuff like that. It was looking at airplane parts and inspecting them for defaults or defects and stuff like that. I was always interested in airplanes and aeronautics and stuff like that since I was a small child. But growing up and in I guess the community that I was surrounded with, I never really felt like it was pilot material. It was always I struggled in school, that type of thing, and always later in life or in high school I started following around the wrong crowd, and getting into facing some problems with addiction and stuff like that. So so during high school, it was, I always felt like I was behind in my grades and stuff like that, and I never felt smart or anything like that. Like I didn't have the tools to succeed, I guess. So I looked at the military as a way out of my current situation and into a career that was into a kind of a lifelong career that would hopefully pan out someday, and I'd be better off than I was and stuff like that. But once I got into the military, I really loved the boot camp, and it gave me a good foundation and a stronger community there. Then when I got out, when I came back home from the Guard after going to tech school and stuff like that, I came back home and I started associating with some of the same people. And I even found that some of the same people were with me in the Guard, and so I fell into those old ways of addiction, and struggling with life in general. And after a couple of years, after a few years, I did my time in the Guard, and still faced these struggles. I went on to deliver pizzas for a couple of years, and then things started crashing down. I didn't have a vehicle at the time because my car broke down and stuff, and so I just it came to a point where I just had to get out of there. I had to completely leave the people that I was around, that I surrounded myself with, including my parents, my friends, everybody. I just totally picked up one day and left. And I, basically had no idea, no plans what I was going to do. I knew some people that I'd met in the Air National Guard. I knew some people in Wyoming. So I had this plan to hitchhike to Wyoming and find my friends and kind of maybe see if I can get back into things up there. And I never made it to Wyoming. I ended up getting stuck in Salt Lake City, Utah. And just trying to make my way in life, stuff like that. I ended up sleeping behind a Catholic church for a few months, and because I was homeless, and just working my way through life, trying different job after job, and then eventually found a new community. I made friends met my wife, and then I, you know, started looking seriously at things, and started looking at seriously at, what I'm going to do with my life, and trying to change around, get away from the addictions, and trying to get a new class, find new communities and new friends and stuff like that. And one of the ways I found a new community was by getting into like programming and that type of thing, because there was, at the time, programming or web development was still kind of new early, even though it was the early 2000s or something. A lot of things were changing, and technology was growing, and so
And it's definitely changed a lot since then.
yeah. And so I found that, there was a lot of other people out there in these chat rooms and programming forums and stuff like that we're all kind of, struggling with questions. And, might be questions, a lot of it was questions about programming, but then, you start getting deeper into questions about business, questions about life and stuff like that. People are just, saying what's going on. I just got this job. I'm over my head. I don't know all these programming languages, etc. And people will just jump in and answer their questions and help them out. And I thought that was amazing. And so that's what kind of got me into away from all that other stuff.
And it's interesting how you said how you kind of felt like you needed to kind of just almost pack up and get away from all of that. There was a study that I was reading about a few months ago that I read, and they were talking about soldiers in Vietnam. And there was lots of drug use over in Vietnam, and some of the drugs that the people were doing over there. The experts, quote unquote experts at the time, were saying, well, some of these drugs, once when you start using them, you're going to be addicted to them, and there's no getting off of them. And so they kind of almost had like no hope for these guys coming back after they got out, back from Vietnam and everything. But
right.
Turns out when they got back, and they got back to their hometowns and their communities with their normal routines that they were going through, the vast majority of them, I think it was over like 80%, I forget the exact numbers,
Right.
They all went back to their normal ways of they stopped using the drugs and everything like that. But some of the people, the small percentage of people who continued to use it, they went back to a place where drug use was higher, where it was more readily available, and it was easier for them to just continue doing that. And so, it's interesting how a change of scenery sometimes, or a change of, location, the people that you're associating with can contribute to, how you're how you form your own habits
For
in
sure.
terms of stuff like that. So that's interesting to see how that worked out in your case, and you saw that similar results from a change of location. Obviously, like you said, it was a hard move, having to kind of pack up and move away from family and friends, and it, dealing with homelessness and things like that. That's obviously not easy for anybody to do. But then you said, eventually you started to discover the programming and things like that. So I'm curious to kind of hear how you went from that stage of, being homeless, and then deciding, something needs to change, and how did you eventually get into programming from where you were at?
So, I guess let me backtrack a little bit. I guess, I had created bonds, and community with, or I had created a bond with the drugs or the alcohol or whatever. And when people are lonely and stuff like that, or they don't have a strong community, they build bonds with different things like bad people, or drugs and stuff like that. So, my thing, leaving my family and stuff like that, leaving all my friends behind was part of, breaking that bond that I had with all of that. So I had this basically separating myself and it allowed me to refresh and restart a whole new life and a whole new outlook on who I was, basically. So, when I left, I got somewhere and I was homeless. I just met other homeless people and I started working. I tried to find work. I tried to hang out with other homeless people that were actually motivated and looking for work and stuff like that, and trying to trying to stay away from, I had a pretty good idea of what, people look like that were on drugs by that time, and you know what I mean. And so finding a different community, and finding a different community, finding different people to talk to and to associate with was kind of how I got away from that, away from that bond of the drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. And so with the, once I, started meeting people and that type of thing, it was easier to start forming relationships with people that were not using drugs and that type of thing. And so, we started, when you can reset yourself or refresh yourself, you start to find that it's easier to make new friends and to start fitting in different places. So I kind of focused on that, tried to make new friends, meeting new people, and I eventually met my wife, and hung out with her, and she started giving me motivation and that type of thing. And then eventually started, I wanted to go back to school. After a while, I was like, I, I started, my motivation started building up. I had a really low self-esteem. I had like a really low motivation when I left, my hometown and all that stuff. When I came to a new place, I was encouraged, to find, by putting myself at the very bottom, I was encouraged to find work and to survive. Basically, it's like a survival instinct. You want to go, find other people and stuff like that. And so that kind of, eventually, just cleaning myself up, keeping myself with people, with like-minded people. And then, with, as far as the programming stuff, I went back to school, and I went back to school to learn electronics at ITT Tech Institute, ITT Technical Institute. And I got in there, and I started, I started forming new bonds, and making new friends. And then, I started learning. They taught us a little bit about, web design and stuff like that, but everything they were teaching us was from, like, 5 years ago. It was like we were always 5 years behind. So I started teaching myself, like, how to do web design, and like I said previously, going into forums and searching Google and stuff like that on how to program. And eventually I just kind of, I traded all those traded all those, thoughts of seeking drugs and stuff like that for seeking answers. I started wanting to find answers to, about my life, about programming, you know, about habits and stuff like that, and trying to figure out why I had addiction, and why, you know, what was going on, and why I had depression, and why I felt all these different ways. Once I started getting into all that stuff, and it just opened a whole new world for me. It wasn't even, I don't even think, I mean, you wanted to hear about the programming and stuff like that, but a lot of it was, I think, just finding communities and stuff that were active, and that were available to people like me that had a lot of questions, and that were basically lost.
Right. Yeah, and so you're not the first person that I've talked to, and this show is still, kind of relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
But you're definitely not the first person that I've talked to who said something similar along those lines in terms of either finding a community or
Mm-hmm.
being together with people, not trying to go it alone and trying to just figure things out on your own. And as a business owner, I'm sure you can relate that to your own business too. If you
Right.
were the CEO and the accountant and the janitor and
Mm-hmm.
the everything else, the marketing and everything else like that, that for any one person, that's just too much. And you're not, I'm sure if you're anything like me, you're not great at all of those things. And so you're going to just have a mediocre business if that's all that you're going to do. And, so instead you go and find people who are great at certain individual things and you build the business that way. And it's, life is really, I don't think much different.
Right.
I don't attempt to cut my own hair, right? Because I'm not trained how to cut my hair, and I would probably look like a clown if I did. And so I go to somebody who knows how to do it, and I come out and look all right. So, but it's the same thing with other things in your background. You want to be around other people who can help you, move forward and go in the direction that you're looking for, as opposed to keeping you where you're at, or even taking you a step backwards from where you want to be. And so I think it's, it's awesome that you had that similar experience, that you kind of discovered, like, you need to be around those people that are going to help get you to that, whatever your goals happen to be, get you to that next level. So obviously, you had some struggles, and you kind of came around at some point, to discover that this community and seeking the answers. Was that kind of like the turning point for you, the tipping point? Like maybe it was when you met your wife, or, whatever. What was the maybe aha moment, or that turning point where you decided, like, that things have to change and this is what it's going to.
Yeah. So that turning point, was like, I think it came to a point where I just felt like I was in this hole that I couldn't climb out of. It was like most of my thoughts were about either finding, at the time, most of my thoughts were about finding my next fix or next party or whatever like that. And, and the other half of the thoughts were about suicide, basically, and just trying to find a way out. You know what I mean? And so the turning point was like, I think the turning point was when I left. I got away from the situation. I left my parents' house and, my grandparents' house, wherever I was living at the time. I left that, and it was like I don't know what it was or why I did it. It was just something that I felt like I had to do. You know what I mean? It's like when it's either life or death, basically. You know what I mean? It's like, do you go down a path that you're going to die in, or do you continue to go down that path? It's bad, it's going to destroy you, or do you start figuring out a way to climb yourself out, or build yourself up so you can get out of that? And basically what I had done is, like, I just figured, I just needed to change. So the turning point was like, it's like basically life or death. It was like, one of my parents, my estranged dad, was, I was living with him at one point in life, or at one point in time right before all this happened. And he was a heroin addict and stuff like this. And he tried choking me one time when I wouldn't take him to go get his heroin fix. At that time I was trying, I was done with drugs, basically. I was done doing that stuff, but I had nowhere to live. And so, he tried to choke me, and I was like, what, screw this, I'm out of here. I never saw him again. I saw him, saw him once, and then he died a short time later. But the turning point was like, just getting out of that situation. It was facing down that life or death situation, and then it all built up. It wasn't just, it didn't happen overnight. It took several years. It took several years of just, there was a few slip ups or whatever where I'd go back, and then I was like, you wake up the next day and you're like, what did I do? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just,
yeah. It sounds like it really would be hard for all of this to kind of transition overnight anyways.
yeah.
You're not going to just wake up the next morning in a different town and all of a sudden have a job and a house and a career and a family and everything like that. It's one of those things that sounds like it almost has to be a slower process to, take
Yeah.
one step at a time. And there's a book I read a few months back called Atomic Habits, and it's about like tiny
Mhm.
changes leading to big results. And so, taking that each step, cumulatively will lead you to a better direction. But,
Mhm.
it's it's hard to just take that one giant leap.
Right.
You're not gonna climb a flight of stairs in one step. You're gonna have to take each individual step one at a time
Mhm.
until you get to the top.
It's
Um,
takes a lot of practice.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just like learning
um,
to walk.
sure,
It's
yeah,
almost like learning
absolutely.
to walk. You have to learn to crawl before you learn to walk. You know what I mean?
And that's it sounds kind of like what you did in terms of your your business. You started off, you went to the ITT Technical Institute, and
Hmm.
you started learning, a little bit of the website, development and things like that back then. And then you took it upon yourself to kind of learn more about that stuff, and so that hard work, eventually led to you kind of creating a business. And
Right.
I
Right.
briefly mentioned I mentioned the name of your business earlier, but why don't you tell people a little bit about your business and kind of how that business started, and what you do now?
Sure. Yeah. So the business I run now is called Event Espresso, like the coffee drink. It's an event ticketing and registration platform, basically for people that want to run. If you're running, say you want to sell tickets to concerts, or you want to sell reservations to summer camps, or even scrapbooking classes, that type of thing. That's kind of what we help with. Our software, you install it on your website, and it allows you to sell tickets and accept reservations to right on your website, and to set payments and stuff like that. I started the business because my wife was a scrapbook demonstrator, or yeah, scrapbooking demonstrator. So she would hold classes and basically supply materials for people to come in and create, like birthday cards and scrapbooking pages for their photo albums, that type of thing. And what happened was she needed a way for people to pay online, and to register and pay online. And everywhere I looked, there was the software, the solutions, the online solutions were quite expensive, and they each took a cut of your of your ticket sales. And so we wanted to kind of bypass that, since my wife was kind of starting out and new. So I started looking around the internet for a software, for like an open source software, like a piece of code that I could use without having to pay a lot of money for it. And I found that WordPress. I found a plugin for WordPress, which allows you to build websites. I found this little plugin that kind of did what she wanted, but then it was missing a lot of features. So I kind of took it apart and learned how it worked, and then kind of reprogrammed it, added a bunch of new features, and then released it under a new name. The person that had developed the first part of the software, he wasn't maintaining it anymore, and it kind of fell to the wayside. So I took it over, reprogrammed a lot of stuff, renamed it, and launched it as a new software. And that's where I'm at today. I basically maintain it and run a business around it. And we have about 10 programmers or 10 of us that actually maintain and market and sell the software to users.
Yeah, and that's a kind of awesome story. You had a need, or I mean, your wife had a need, and you kind of set out to try to solve that problem, and
Mm-hmm.
then you like kind of fell into a business around it, which is
Right, right.
kind of neat. And some of my products are similar to that, where I was kind of I guess scratching my own itch, trying to solve a problem, and then it turned out, oh yeah, I have a product that someone is actually willing to pay money for, and that so let's try
Mm-hmm.
to build a business around this kind of thing. So it's awesome to see that you can find that motivation and to get to that business process where you're at, and through the hard work of dissecting the code of the original software that you found, and then adding new features and building up like that, and then through, obviously it's not an easy thing to do all of that stuff, and then marketing and selling it and everything like that is hard work too, but that's like kind of like what you were saying, just life in general. It wasn't an easy process getting from that kind of rock bottom stage to to where you're at, or even that turnaround kind of phase. Building a business isn't necessarily easy either, but if you stick with it, it gets easy. I don't want to say it gets easier.
I don't know if it ever gets easier.
I don't think it ever gets easy. But it's not the it's not the fear of, gee, I don't know if this is even a thing that anyone will ever buy. You've been in business for a few years now, and you probably have some comfort level of knowing that your product is solid and people will pay for it.
But it's a long road.
It's a long road, but you can get there eventually where the business is growing and maintaining and everything like that.
Right.
So
it almost feels like sometimes it almost feels like it just happened overnight. You know what I mean? Here you are 10 years later, and it's just like a blink of an eye. It's probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me. In a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
And I guess in that respect, you sort of just needed to be open to the opportunities that were presenting themselves to you. For example, like your wife having this need to have this software to book tickets for the classes that she was doing, the demonstrations or whatever that she was doing. If you kind of just poked around and found a couple solutions that were out there, but they were too expensive, and then just kind of threw your hands up in the air and said, well, that's all I could find. You and I probably wouldn't be talking right now. And this conversation could have gone a different way. And you might've been working in a different job, and, a whole bunch of other ifs could have happened. And so that's, by taking advantage of that opportunity that presented itself, and kind of digging in and putting in the hard work to get to where you're at now. Even though initially all you were trying to do is just solve one person's problem, your wife's problem that she was having, it turned into a whole business where, quite frankly, you're solving thousands and thousands of people's problems by having that same solution. All these people are, whether it's a charity event where they're selling, tickets to, a banquet dinner, or to a concert, or to a cooking class, or, any number of things. There's people out there who are trying to sell tickets to it, and you have the solution for them, in a affordable way that isn't, going to cost so much money per ticket or whatever. So it's awesome that kind of all kind of came to fruition that way. And you also entered a business plan competition early on in the business. Do you mind telling a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we entered. So I early on in the business, I had been running I had built the software, and I was running it by myself for around 2 years. I had a little bit of help here and there from a few programmers that I had hired on a contract basis. But then I worked where I worked at the time while I was building the software. I worked at a marketing agency, or not a marketing agency. I worked in a marketing department it was a coding and billing academy up in Salt Lake. But anyways, I worked alongside this guy named Garth Coyle. And so I brought him on about 2 years into this process. It was actually about a year. Well, for the whole time I had been talking to him, and he was going to school at the Utah. It was a Utah State, or no, was it? What was it? I think it was University. Oh, it was University of Utah. So Garth was going to the University of Utah during the time I was building this. He was in business. He was getting his MBA, his master's of business administration, and he had wanted to go into healthcare administration. But the whole time I was, through the whole 2 years I was building this thing, we were working side by side, and he mentioned, or well, I had talked to him, and I knew he was really good with like business stuff and this type of thing. And so I had been talking to him and like, hey, why don't you come on board? I'll bring you on, as a co-founder and that type of thing. And he wasn't really interested at first. Then he went away to Michigan to work at a hospital out there. I think it was Ford Hospital or something. And he ended up about 6 months later. He's like, you know what? I've been thinking I want to take you up on your offer. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. I'll bring you on board. And then about a month later, he was telling me about this program at the University of Utah. Since he was still in the University of Utah I think he was still doing something there, even though he had graduated. But he was telling me about this program, and it was the Utah Entrepreneur Challenge, and it was a chance to win like $40,000 for your business idea. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go ahead and submit an application. And so we submitted an application, and we got into it, and we ended up having to write like a 30-page business plan, give a presentation to a panel of judges and all this stuff. And so we went through all this stuff. Man, it was hell. It was crazy. We had to dissect every single little part of our business and how we're going to make money and where we're going to be in 10 years and how much profit we think we're going to make in the first year and all this stuff. And so, we get into this thing, and, we're like, the whole time we're like thinking we had no chance. We don't have a chance at all in winning this thing. So we go through all this, and then we end up in the top 10. We end up in the top 10, one of the top 10 challengers, I guess, or the top 10, whatever they had going. And so, yeah, one of the finalists. That's the word I was looking for. So we ended up as one of the top 10 finalists, and so we got invited to a banquet up at the University of Utah, and we're standing there. We had a booth and all this stuff, and so we had our marketing materials that I made up, and we had a little mobile app that we were getting ready to release, and so we had all this stuff, and it was like just off our software, just like off the wall. It was event ticketing, and all these other people were doing medical stuff, like medical devices, and trying to prevent world hunger and all this stuff. And so we were sitting there. It was just me and my friend Garth, my co-founder Garth, and his wife. My wife was pregnant at home, and we were like, it's no big deal. We're probably not going to win. We're just going to go and show up. So we were sitting there, and we're stuffing our faces full of food. And next thing you know, they were just naming off all the people, and they get to the last three, and we had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden, they announced. They said, now for the grand prize winners, and Event Espresso, and they announced our name, and we both looked at each other and we're like, what? Did they just say our name? So we looked around, and the whole room, this whole big room, is like staring at us, all these people, and we're like, what? so like, come up on stage. So we go up there, and they're like, they had this huge check for us. They ripped the tablecloth or whatever it was, the blanket off of this huge cardboard check, and it was like $40,000 to Event Espresso, and we're just staring at each other, and I had no words to say. I was dumbfounded, but my co-founder Garth, he got up there and said thanks and all this stuff, and I was fighting back tears. I had no idea.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I got up to the stage and I was like, yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody. I just walked away. I had no idea, but it was pretty crazy. It was like, we spent so much time going over this and writing the business plan and giving a presentation and trying to make sure our marketing materials were together. And it was just like, it all happened like in a blink of an eye,
Right. And I guess this all goes back again to, just putting in the work, the hard work and the dedication to doing that. Because if you did a half-assed job on your presentation for all of this, there's no chance that you would have won. With other companies putting in the work to get through that, and so you did. I'm imagining it's probably late nights and lots of blood, sweat, and tears going into it, that type of stuff. But, you did it, and at the end of the day, you won. And it's not like they were just handing out. they weren't just handing out checks to everybody who applied. Right, so obviously you did something that was special and unique to be able to get to that point. So anyways, well, it looks like we're kind of coming up on time here with all this, but I wanted to give you a chance. I like to ask this kind of like closing question. Is there anything that you wish someone would have told you before you joined the military? Any kind of advice or future planning or anything kind of like that would have helped you going forward?
I wish I'd have looked at other options of in the military besides going into the career I found, because I felt like I never felt like I really had what it would have taken to become like a pilot or something like that. My goals, I always wanted to be pilot and stuff like that. So I wish somebody would encourage me to follow my dreams and encourage me or give me more motivation. I wish I would have had more motivation to follow what I wanted to do, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, setting your goals and like actually reaching for those, is, that's awesome advice to have, because so many people are just content with whatever they're going through or wherever they're at, and they don't stretch for the something bigger or better. And it seems like you've done a lot of stretching over the years and getting working your way up, and it's sort of like climbing a staircase or a ladder or something like that. You got to take it one step at a time, and you certainly have done that. So so thank you for sharing that story and offering that advice. I'm sure that the story I know for me was very inspirational and kind of motivational to listen to the first time I heard it, and even more so this time around. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right. Appreciate it. Take care, man.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com, or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Drive On Podcast.